Denise.
Hello, Anita. Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of My Duke and I.
In today's episode, we're going to recap the last few days and closing ceremony of the Invictus Games. It certainly has been an amazing Invictus Games, wouldn't you say?
Yes, indeed it has. Along with the presidential delegation and dignitaries from each participating countries, Princess Marguerite and King Willem-Alexander of the Netherlands attended, and there were representatives of NATO and the EU. This is really impressive because I think this is the first time since the Invictus Games have begun we've had so many dignitaries, and we've had NATO and the EU in attendance. So I think this shows how much the Invictus Game has grown and the caliber of people that is now getting involved. So yeah, it was really great to see this.
Absolutely. So we had the first recap already. We covered the first few days. And as mentioned, we're now covering the few days. And, I'm really excited because we have two very special guests today to help us recap this exciting and wonderful event. We have Dr. Diane, a medical doctor who specializes in infectious diseases. Dr. Diane.
Yes, thank you guys for inviting me. This is my first time, and I count it a privilege. Anything that has to do with our veteran, whether it's here in the U.S., which is now my home, or just internationally, really piques my interest. And that is why I was very pleased to not only watch from a distance Invictus Game, but also participate by supporting the Worthy event through their website, which I just want to give a shout out to for our listeners to take a hop over and kind of scroll through and look for ways and means to support. So I'll put a pause, and then I guess when it's my turn to delve into a little bit of why Invictus Game and the veteran is so important to me, I'll go forward.
Thank you, Dr. Diane. We also have Janice, who is a veteran that served in the Army for 30 years. Actually,
Wow.
I want to go back a little because Janice has worked with veterans for 30 years, but she has served in the Army for 3 years. Janice, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. So Janice, will you tell the listeners a little bit more about your work experience with veterans?
Okay. After the military, I began work with the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I've worked on two sides of the three-part equation. I've worked with VBA, which is for Veterans Benefits Administration, and the majority of my career has been with VHA, Veterans Healthcare Administration. And the third part of that apple, NCA, the National Cemetery Administration. I've never worked for them, but because of my job, we needed to be familiar with that section. In my job with VA, I did not work directly with one-on-one with veterans, but as an education program specialist, the varying positions I had, we trained our employees with different aspects of taking care of our veteran patients. The administrative side, even though we did not see the veterans as historically as a medical per se, but we were trained in what our mission is and how we needed to always be on stage. Basically, learn when you walk in the hallway of our facility, we learned to read the veterans' faces, no matter where we were going. If a veteran seemed to be in despair, we were to stop what we were doing and to offer the best customer service possible to that veteran.
So, Janice, is there a reason why you needed to distinguish between the VBA and the VHS?
Well, a lot of people are not aware. A long time ago, all we had was the Veterans Administration. But President Ronald Reagan made the VA a cabinet, part of his cabinet, and that's how we got the Department of Veterans Affairs. And then he divided the entities, we were divided into three administrations. When I say VBA, the VBA, Veterans Benefits, that takes care of all of the veterans' benefits, the education, the home loan guarantees, all the benefits that veterans or eligible for is taken care of under the VBA. When I say VHA, Veteran Healthcare Administration, that's all of the medical needs. Our medical centers, our community-based outpatient clinics, our contracted healthcare, all that falls upon the VHA. And then there's NCA, the National Cemetery Administration. And that's the national VA cemeteries where honorably discharged veterans and our spouse may be buried there. Now, some states have their own veterans military veteran cemeteries. That's at the state level, but when it says National Cemetery Administration, that is a VA level Veterans Administration cemetery.
Wow. Okay. Wow. So Janice, as a veteran, can you tell us what the Invictus Games means to you and what goes through your mind when you see veterans who have served their countries participating in these games?
Well, the Invictus Games mean a lot to me as a veteran that fortunately I have no service connection disability. But as a veteran working for the VA, I've seen my share of veterans that come back with varying degrees of injuries. And just like Harry likes to say, the invisible injuries, those are the ones we really have to be careful when we're dealing with our veteran patients because they may have the invisible injury. It gladdens my heart to see a veteran that has lost a limb for their country, a veteran that has an invisible injury, a veteran who may have all of their body parts, but they have like an injury to their body parts, to their bones or something. When they can get out there after coming home, not whole like they left, when they can get over or adjust or adapt to those hurdles they have to cross and get out and say, hey, well, I can learn to play volleyball in a wheelchair or sitting down. I can learn to play basketball while I'm being mobile in my wheelchair. And it pleases me a lot to see them readily accepting their new norm and being able to meet a community where they all can lean on each other, even though they came back differently. And I just enjoy, I like to see it. It brings joy into my heart to see them do that. And it means a lot that Prince Harry, in this short time, being inspired by Wounded Warriors, decided to bring something home for his own nation veterans and to watch it grow and prosper in all these years. It's very pleasing. And when, like we tease each other within the different branches of service, when we meet up and say, oh, you went with the dumb group, you with the Army. But like I said, we joke about it here in the state line. But if it comes for us getting together, fighting a war, those lines aren't crossed. Those lines become one. And this is the same thing I see in the Invictus Games with our allied veterans all come together from different nations. They all have their different issues, but they all come back in camaraderie, defeating the war of isolation, defeating the war of subconsciousness saying, oh, you're never going to be the same again, or you're not worth being alive. They're defeating all that same war together again. And that is very pleasing.
Wow.
So basically the Invictus is helping to break down all the stigmas.
Yes, they have the camaraderie, they can come and it's almost like a family reunion, basically. They come together, hey, we're going to beat you at this game, but when it's all said and done, we're still holding hands. We're treading this trek together.
That's pretty amazing. That's really amazing. That's a lot to think about. And I guess oftentimes layman people don't really realize what goes on in a military personnel's mind or what their families have to encounter once they're discharged. And so often I feel like the veterans are not treated as the heroes they are when they return.
Absolutely. I can honestly say the VA itself has improved tremendously over the past 30 years. At one point, it was almost like a stigma to come in and say that you're a veteran that need help with things. But I thank God that he placed people strategically to help improve the image and to hire people to let them know you're here for the veteran. This is a job, but the veteran is your number one focus. Sometimes they call and you're trying to address their call may get misdirected. Instead of going to a clinic, it comes on the executive side. Even if that call comes there, I am to stop what I'm doing and listen to that veteran. And sometimes they just want to talk. They simply want to hear a voice that's accepting to them, and they simply want to talk. And it may take 15 minutes to let them get out what they need to say, and then we direct them to where they need to go. So we have to learn to be good listeners as well.
I definitely see this in the Invictus Games. You could see the brotherhood and the sisterhood and the elation in being around each other, having someone to talk to. Not only that, the idea that you have experienced the same thing that I have experienced, you could definitely see the camaraderie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. That's something. Now, I would say, I think most people are aware by now that Prince Harry is the founder and patron of the Invictus Games. He was, as you mentioned before, Janice, inspired by the Wounded Warrior Games here in the US. He founded the Invictus Games back in 2014, and his aim is to inspire wounded, sick, and injured servicemen and women to use sports as a part of their healing process. Now, Dr. Diane, from a medical point of view, you've had the opportunity to work with veterans or attend to veterans that, in different, whether ailments or different capacity. Could you elaborate a little bit or shed some light on the type of injuries and some of the encounters and experiences you've had with veterans?
Sure. Thank you, guys. So first of all, I am boarded in internal medicine and infectious diseases. So it gives me a unique opportunity to not only work with veteran as a consultant, but also as a general physician. And there is a spirit that I love here in the US, where whenever you see a veteran, whether it's in the store, at a restaurant, or on the airplane, there is just this deference that you just automatically feel towards them. And it's so absolutely very common just to hear, thank you for your services. Thank you for your services. And I have a puppy that was given to me from one of my patients that passed, and I kept it in a drawer so I could always have it. So the idea of wearing it and misplacing it or something like that, I just keep it at home. In addition to my training, I was partially trained in one of the VA hospital, and that was also another opportunity that I had to interact with our veteran. And the idea to know that there is a group of heroes among us that are willing to not spare limb or lives to serve. It's just something that it's hard for me in my own capacity to understand, because it's, to be honest, to face something to say, I could lose my life here or lose my limb here. I don't think I would readily do it. So even from that point of view, I have a lot of respect for a veteran. That aside, in my capacity to take care of veteran, it's often the unseen wound that is very difficult to heal. It's often the lack of understanding in knowing that when a veteran comes back home, maybe all intact physically, but forever change emotionally and mentally because of what they have lived and experienced, because of possibly coming home without their friends and their buddies, or if they were, for example, in leadership position, having lost people that they were technically responsible for. So there is that injury, not disorder. And I really appreciate Prince Harry for trying to change the language, because language matter. So the injury that cannot be seen, and also to know that you can have a veteran that have suffered, let's say, for example, an anxiety injury, or anxiety because of the injury, or depression because of the injury, and to know that you could probably see them at this visit today or in the office today, fine, and they're in control. And then the next day, they're not so fine and they're not so okay. And unfortunately, a lot of times people believe it's a one-off. It's a one-off. So you're diagnosed with anxiety because of the injury that you live, not what happened to, not what wrong with you, but what happened to you. Another phrase that I've heard and picked up from Prince Harry, and hope that it will become a more common phrase, not what's wrong with you, but what has happened to you. So because of what has happened to them. And the idea is, okay, so you're depressed, you're okay, move on. No, it actually wax and wane. And they required, tune up, for lack of a better word, where you'll see them again, you'll revisit and you'll talk. And maybe because of this lack of understanding that illness wax and wane, just like in the diabetics, you may have the sugar well controlled today and you may suffer an infection. And because of the infection, your sugar is out of control. The same, you may have a vet without any physical injury, who maybe for the past year has been in absolute control of their anxiety and depression, but just one event, one smell, one word, and it triggers that cascade, and they may temporarily lose, quote unquote, control, and may just need to be revisited a little bit more frequently, be supported a little bit more frequently. So just to share some of the experience I've had and to put a human face on the story, I'll never forget when I was at the University of Texas in my training, very young, very bright-eyed, and I saw this gentleman, young, his face absolutely disfigured from third-degree burned. His limb was fastened to his side from contraction from third-degree burn. Just walking the halls. He would not stay in his room. He just did not want to be enclosed. So he would just walk the hall, and we allow him. He can walk the hall and circle the hall. And he'll stop at our desk and he'll talk to us and we'll all talk to him. And he'll tell us the same story and we'll listen as if we're hearing it for the first time. And he did not only lose his physical sense of self and the injuries that cannot be readily seen and touched, but he also lost his family because his wife could no longer deal with this new person. And so the loss of limb garner more sympathy, the physical scar garner more sympathy. But sometimes the unseen wound, the loss behind the scene, is not seen and is not addressed. And I just want to bring it round again to Prince Harry, this amazing young man, wise beyond his years, the man who thoroughly understands what it means, the word service, has not only identified the physical injury, not only identified that is not what's wrong with you, but what has happened to you, has also identified the importance of word make a difference. And so for the Invictus game, very needed. I'm very pleased to see that since its inception, I think it's in 2014, is that correct? Or is it 16? Since it's
14.
Right.
Yeah.
Since its inception, it has grown. More and more leaders are coming on board. It is my hope as a medical profession who takes care of our vets, who absolutely love them and deemed it a privilege to try and help in whichever way I can, that this is a young man who's making it easy. And that's why I spoke of the Invictus website and say people should truly hop over. I'm actually trying to give away Invictus shirt because I can't, it's just too much, but it's just my way to support. What else can I say except that I am glad that he created the Invictus game, and it only a veteran, only a warrior, only a person who has been healed and continue to heal could do something like this for our veteran, because it is very hard for us to grasp these things. So again, the Invictus game, no words can truly describe its importance, and it probably will take a vet to say, and I've listened to some of their interview, how it's changing their lives, how it gives them purpose. And yes, I was busy at work, but I was getting caught up and what was going on. And yes, I'm here for the Invictus game, and I may go to Germany to see them. I have families in Germany. My sister lives there. She's a nurse. And I said, oh, the Invictus game is coming your way. I have to kind of tell my mom what it is. She's not as, engaged as we are in keeping in touch with what Prince Harry, the veteran, is doing. And so hopefully I can make it over there. If not, definitely in Canada. So in summary, for me, as my role as a medical doctor in both capacity as an internal medicine infectious disease doctor, it's a little bit sad to see that I have discharged a vet from the hospital and they're waiting because the vet is a huge administration. I think it's the biggest department in the US, and things have to be properly organized and so sometimes they're discharged and we're waiting on the VA to kind of get the pieces together. But we always tell our vets it takes a while because they want to make sure it's done right. They want to make sure that when we discharge you, the proper links are in place and you do not fall through the track. So I feel very privileged to be able to use my talent and my voice to say this is what is going on. Warm my heart again to hear our vets say, even if a call is misplaced, you just don't simply say, this is not the department and transfer. You listen, you have a conversation. And this is a teaching moment for me because I probably would say, hold on for transfer. So this is a teaching moment for me as well to say, this is our vet. They were willing to give life and limb. The least I can do is probably, leave a little bit later, but to make sure that our vet is cared for. And I think this is why Prince Harry is doing it the way he is. And I can just see him in my mind's eye, just working tirelessly behind the scene, doing everything like Duchess Megan said, to make it perfect for them. I'm just absolutely so motivated again as a doctor who participate in the care of vets. And even one of the clinic that I work out of, I was the only physician in that office that was allowed to accept the VA insurance, because not every clinic or every physician have that access. And I felt very pleased. And I wondered, how did that happen? It happened because, like I said, during part of my training in internal medicine at one of our VA hospital, and I believe once in the system, always in the system. So I was very pleased to be able to take care of our vet. And as I continue to work and to serve in the medical field, and as I continue to meet our vets, I will always endeavor to take the moment to say, it may not be my specialty, or you may be on my list by mistake, but let me see what I can do before I hand you where you need to be. So thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Diane. This has been so insightful, so educational. This is like, wow. And I think this is the kind of conversation that people need to hear more, so that more people will be able to empathize with veterans, because so often we see a veteran, we pass them by, and yes, we say thank you for your service, but it's so much more than that. They've given so much of themselves. They've sacrificed their families. And, until you listen to someone like you, or listen to someone like Janice, who's had firsthand experience, sometimes it really just doesn't register. Prince Harry mentioned in his closing speech the veterans having family support, and how whatever happens to the veteran not just affects that individual, but also the entire family.
You have all summited your mountain, and I could not be prouder of every single one of you. We, your friends and family, could not be prouder of who you are and what you represent, especially given what it's taken to get here. Mindset is everything. The openness and honesty of your feelings and experiences of what has happened to you, rather than what is wrong with you, provides understanding and healing. From interviews that Invictus did across the park this week, and as some of you have shared with me personally, many would have taken their own life had it not been for these games. You made a choice to be here, to stay with us, to grow with us, and I can't explain how much it means to me and how much all of you mean to us. So thank you.
Could you elaborate on that, please?
Well, with the slight experience I've had with the clinical side with this, when the veteran is there to receive the health care, he or she is going to be the main focus. Sometimes their behavior, which they can't control, has caused problems, strain on families. And this is why it's important to take care of the entire family. You deal with the veteran first. And a lot of times the social workers will have, once the veteran is ready, they would invite the family. Sometimes it's just the spouse first that comes to a session with the spouse. And sometimes they bring, after that's ready, they bring in the children, depending on the children's ages. Lots of times they have what's known as receptions. They'll have several families come in with varying degrees of social issues, depending on their invisible injury. And it's like a little party. You know, everybody kind of meet each other, socialize, and the families can get to see that they're not alone. Sometimes they make connections where they can socialize outside of the clinical setting. And when it's time for the social network is fine, but the one-on-one with the families is always private. That's not like a social setting at all. But it's important because families go through a lot when that injury is there. You already got the stress of the marriage. Some people don't want to hang around for that, and that causes the stressor more on the person who has the invisible injury. So the purpose of it is to include the entire family as part of the healing process.
Okay, wow, that's really something. Dr. Diane, we
Yes.
hear a lot of post-traumatic stress injuries. Can you elaborate on that? I have a friend whose husband is a veteran, and I remember sometimes certain things would trigger emotions of times when he was back in the Afghanistan war or the Iraqi war, and he pretty much had to go into a room by himself because it would be so traumatizing, for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm.
And I've often wondered, I can't imagine having to see someone I love go through things like that. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So for purpose of this podcast, I'll add my voice, but I just want to quickly say that I am not a licensed healthcare physician, and that this is just for a conversation, and of course from my observation as a medical doctor and dealing with patients, and because it does not matter what our training will be, we are almost like cross-trained in some way. We all have to do rotation in psychiatry, we all have to do psychology 101, so forth and so on. So post-traumatic stress disorder, which is what it is still currently called, but I think Prince Harry / the Invictus Game, they say post-traumatic stress injury, which I would be like, hallelujah. We know it's a mental and behavioral disorder, and you normally see it in people who have been exposed to some kind of traumatic event. And for purpose of this conversation, we'd say their traumatic event would be warfare. But in truth, it could be any kind of trauma. Even, patients that have been in terrible accidents are traumatized. They can no longer drive because of the triggers, or just hearing the rumbling of an engine brought back the memory of the trauma. So it could be anything, but for purpose of this conversation, let's say warfare. So these young men and women, because most of the times they're truly young men and women, you're not going to get a 40, 60-year-old person trotting off to war unless this person had started from very young. And you may or may not be aware, but the frontal lobe of the brain, which is the biggest lobe, actually develops when you're about 20, 26 to 30, not 20, 26 going up to 30. That's when the frontal lobe is fully developed. Now, the function, just a brief mention, the function of the frontal lobe is for cognitive function and processing, for control, for how you will cope or process or deal with the situation. So imagine you take a young 18-year-old, 19-year-old, under 26, under 30, and you send them off to war, right? And all of a sudden they're being exposed to these overwhelming sounds and sights and feelings and emotions. And their frontal lobe is not yet fully developed, because when you're exposed to things the way they are created, because I believe in creation, other people would say the way that we evolve depending on what their belief system is. When you see things, you kind of either put it away and decide, I will deal with it later. Or you almost put it in a pocket, right? And then you will come back, you'll revisit, and you'll process. Just like us, if we have like a mass casualty, and we have to open all the big doors of the hospital and just rush patient in, we just do what we're trained for, and we decide to put the emotions aside for a while. Just like when we have pulse shooting, and so many of the doctors after and police officer after had serious issues, right? I mean, don't think any of my colleagues stopped working as physician, but I think there was a prominent police officer who was unable to resume his duties and actually retired. So you take these young people, we expose them to tremendous amount of onslaughts, and then we bring them back. I do not know how the military process these people. And like I said, it's not a one-off where they're processed and they're fixed and they're done. I personally, I sometimes dream of, looking for a post with the vet, but I personally would love to have where, and maybe it is already, where they are not only come back, process, and let go, but there is a constant. It doesn't matter if you feel okay, just check in. It may be a 10-minute, 15-minute check-in, just come. I also would love to see a system where the families are prepared, because like the example I gave you with that vet that I dealt with that could not stay in his room, and when he's ill, he just paced the hospital wall and lost his wife because he was a new person, and he would go back in his room when he's tired just to sleep, be medicated and sleep. I wish the families could be better prepared to receive their loved ones, to anticipate that when they are back, that their brain and their mind and their inner self would have experienced so much that they are going to have triggers. Their behavior will be different. Their cues will be different. How their way of thinking will be different. The way they feel will be different. That their fight or flight, which is normal human response. If you're in a burning house, you're going to be able to run very faster. So that they're constantly in a fight or flight, powered by cortisones and adrenaline. So the whole post-traumatic stress disorder, which I hope will eventually be injured, is a very real diagnosis. I do have patients who would talk to me about it. We help them to identify their triggers. Sometimes it's not one, or it could be anything. But once they have that trigger and that emotion that follow it, to be able to identify it and deal with it. And certainly, like I said in my disclaimer, I am an internal medicine trained doctor with a subspecialty in infectious diseases, not a healthcare provider. So that's basically what I'll say in regards to that.
Okay, thank you so much, Diane. This is just so insightful and so wonderful. And I believe I saw somewhere towards the end of the Invictus game where they said that there's a camp that's set up so that when the veterans return from the Invictus Games, there's a camp where they go to get help in readjusting back into society, them and their families.
And you know what? Just to interrupt you, pardon me. as I sat and watched the game and watched the camaraderie and the love and the support, especially for the Ukrainians who were going to go back and war, I found myself saying, I wish that there would be some kind of support system to help them to come back from that high to their reality. So I'm so glad and so thankful that the Invictus game. And I also heard that Better Up would be part of the team of mental health provider for our vets. So way excited, way pumped to see Invictus game and what they have accomplished, and that they're filling a very, very important gap that the healthcare system may have failed to identify. If I'm wrong, please correct me. Most times the head of the VA is not necessarily a former vet, but could be like a civilian. And while their role is very sure they're well trained, I hope that right beside them, they are surrounded by vets who have actually lived the experience to help to guide the policies.
Yeah, Janice, could you shed any light on that?
Well, a few times we've had some who were never served, but the team that they get together, they're surrounded by veterans, and the veterans have a whole lot of input into the department at the cabinet level.
That is a cabinet position, right?
Yes, and we can thank the late Ronald Reagan for that.
Yes. Normally, as you said, they're not always veterans, but for the most part, that what I've heard is that their goal is always to choose a veteran because, they understand the veterans' experience best.
Well, this has been a very enlightening, very much needed conversation. And I would like to thank Dr. Diane and Janice for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on this podcast to explain to our listeners, the things that we normally would not know. This has really been quite educational. And, kudos to Prince Harry because he has thought about pretty much everything. And one of the great things about this is it's not just for veterans in the United States or veterans in the United Kingdom. It's veterans worldwide. And that in itself is a tremendous achievement, because I wonder too if some of these veterans fought an opposite side, but irregardless of that, to see veterans from around the globe united, coming together because of their shared experiences, I think that is a remarkable achievement. And so, yeah, we will continue to support the Invictus Games, and I ask all of our listeners, as Dr. Diane said, if you haven't had a chance to go on the Invictus Games website, please do. And there's also a donation section there that if you would like to donate to a veteran or to the Invictus Games, I'm sure that will be appreciated too. So on that, Anita, do you have anything else?
I just want to say thank you to Dr. Diane and Janice for really educating me and letting me know exactly what our veterans are going through and the healing process, and all who are involved in that process. And yes.
Yeah.
Well, you are welcome.
Okay, so on behalf of myself and all of our listeners, Janice and Dr. Diane, I would like again to thank you for sharing your insights, and I'd like to thank all the listeners for tuning in to My Duke and I to give us some of your time, because we do know that your time is also precious, and we appreciate you taking time out to listen to us. So on that note, I will say thank you until we meet again.
A pleasure.